We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the Budget Advisory Commission meeting on September 2nd, 2021, meeting via Teams virtual meeting. I will start out with the land acknowledgement. This is Lindsay Hobson. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and the land. We acknowledge that we live and work on the unceded land of the Dena'ina people and thank them for their past, present, and future stewardship on the land on which we live. Move on to the roll call.
Okay. Lindsay Hobson.
Present.
Anna Brawley.
I'm here.
Carolyn Hall.
Present.
Tasha Hutch.
Here.
Jonathan King.
Here.
Nolan Cloda. Okay. Carla Macano.
I'm here.
On the phone, I assume?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Jimmy Miner. Alyssa Rodriguez.
Here.
James Smallwood. And we got, who just joined in? What?
Anchorage School District.
Okay. So Anchorage School District just joined in. So I'm calling the meeting to order. Then acknowledgement, roll call, approval. Okay. So then approval of the agenda. Do you guys drive it? You guys drive it, right?
Yeah, I can take it from here. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
This is Anna. I'll move to approve.
This is Jonathan, second.
All right. And then I see that we have Forrest Dunbar here. Forrest, are you ready to do the assembly report?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. If everybody can hear me okay. So we had one, I believe this organization hasn't met since our last meeting. So we had one Budget and Finance Committee meeting in the interim. And we spoke with the administration primarily about budget to actuals and revenues. And I should say also I appreciated the report given by, was it Anna? Was it you or was it Lindsay? It was Anna, right?
Yep, it was me.
Yeah, thank you for that report. And we very much appreciate the work that this entity does. So a few highlights that I'm sure the administration will get into in more detail. We went over overtime issues, and in general, most of the departments are where we expected them to be, but overtime for both police and fire are running hot, as they say, which is a concern because those are obviously our largest departments. And fire tends to do this every year. But we were hoping that every year we try to resolve it. I think the police issue is concerning, and there was some discussion about whether or not additional federal funds related to the COVID pandemic would help pay for some of the additional costs.
Yeah, what we're landing on is like the bang for the buck with the roll vinyl is actually really good.
Thank you. What was I going to say? Oh, on the revenue side, alcohol tax is coming in stronger than we had budgeted for. The largest negative variance is the PFD. And for those who maybe are new to this body, the municipality garnishes the permanent fund dividend every year and earns millions of dollars that way. And as of the last budget committee meeting, the PFD amount was at zero. And so that created a $4 million negative variance, approximately $4 million. The state house has since passed an $1,100 PFD. I think there are probably people on this call that understand the sort of ins and outs of the state politics better than I do. So I can't give you an estimate of where that PFD is going to land, but I'll just tell you that where it lands directly impacts the municipal budget. One issue I would say of surprise and perhaps concern for myself and some other members, we learned from the administration that the proposed 5% cut to each of the departments is also going to be applied, or at least asked for, from each of the enterprises and utilities. And that, frankly, doesn't make a lot of sense to many of us. The budget, the utilities, many of them are under the RCA. And the enterprises as well. They generate their own revenue. They rely on federal grants in some cases, and their budget is just fundamentally different. And a 5% cut from the water utility, that gets into ratepayer issues that are fundamentally different than the municipality setting its property tax. So we will certainly ask the administration to explain more of that when the time comes. Our budget analyst, Desiree, is working with the administration now to lay out the series of special meetings and work sessions that we typically had leading up to the budget, the passage of the budget. And I believe, and maybe Carl will speak to it more, that we'll be aiming for late November or perhaps the first meeting in December for passage of that budget. But of course, that will also be determined by the amount of work we get done on the front end. How early do we get the budget? How many amendments are there? What kind of presentations are done leading up to the nights where we actually have the 2 nights where we have to take public testimony and then debate and eventually amend the budget. We received the 120-day memo an hour and a half ago, and so I haven't had a chance to look at it. I don't know if your body has received it yet, but yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at it, and that's the preliminary data required by code for the 2020 budgets. We are required by code to receive that 120 days prior, and we just did receive it. But like I said, I haven't had a chance to read through it. So, we will be looking for advice from this body, certainly. And I think that, folks know this. If you can get it to us probably before or immediately following your November meeting, I think just being cognizant of our timetable, that we are going to look to have the budget introduced. We hope to have the budget introduced in November and passed in late November, early December, perhaps late December. But insofar as we can take your advice and work it into recommendations and amendments, I think that's important. I think that one thing this body should also request of the administration is a comparison between this year's budgets and the budgets in the past. And I think it's important to keep things in context. They've been speaking about a 5% across the board budget cut. That's going to be very challenging to accomplish without including police and fire. But I'll say that, 3 of the 5 years that I was involved with the budget process, we either flat funded the budget or cut the budget. And the last year, it's really hard to sort of to suss out where the real growth was because of all of the, and you guys who were involved with this know this, because of the COVID spending. And that really made the last budget process really challenging. But we had 1% and 2% cuts and flat funding for a number of the years that I was on the body. And so I think the idea that we can have a large cut without impacts to services, I think is, personally, I am skeptical, and I hope that this body asks questions about what services may or may not be impacted. Last thing I'll say, our next budget hearing is on the 16th of September, and I would expect that the budget process will really kick off thereafter. Are there any questions?
So I mean, subject to check, I'm thinking that our November meeting is November 4th.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're saying before that November 4th or immediately following that meeting? Is that the one you're referring to?
Well, I think you should look at obviously you'll see the schedule just like we will. I think obviously the earlier the better. If you were to pass something at that November 4th meeting, I think it could absolutely be worked into amendments from the assembly. But if you want to get your ideas to the administration as well, I mean, obviously earlier is better. Yeah, I think definitely I would recommend not passing them after the November 4th meetings. As I say, I think November 4th is probably the last date you should shoot for, unless you do a special meeting like in the week or two just after that.
Okay.
This is Carla. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Carla.
Hey, Forrest, I just wanted to, if my memory serves me right, there have been other years and other administrations who have asked for a 10% across the board. I mean, sorry, I'm out of breath because I just walked up a bunch of stairs. It was more of a, at the time, and I haven't seen the mayor's memo, and I haven't seen the mayor's language on this, but it was more of a just in case. Let's see if we can cut 10% across the board, but it wasn't necessarily put into play, if that makes any sense. So once again, I haven't seen the mayor's language, so I don't know exactly what he's after, but there have been other administrations and other years that they've said, okay, everybody show us a budget with 10% across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly possible. That was not the rhetoric used. That's not the rhetoric we've heard from Dave Bronson over the last several months. He has said, no, we're going to do a 5% across the board cut. Now, they might walk that back, but that was what he said, April, May, June, July. So that's what we are anticipating. But you're right. I mean, I know that the police department was asked to produce a 5% cut that they proposed to the administration. The administration has refused to share that information with me. And I think they've said it's deliberative. So I don't think they're going to go forward with that 5% cut. But that's kind of speaks to what you're saying, Carla, that some parts of the municipality are being asked to prepare what a cut would look like and not necessarily implement the cut.
And it looks like James has his hand up. Sorry.
Yeah, I have a question for us. Just real quick, you mentioned the 5% cut that would include the enterprises and utilities.
Yeah.
Forgive me for not completely understanding how that flows, but if enterprises and utilities aren't dependent upon tax or the taxes, then where is that 5% supposed to go then? I think it would.
So I think there are a couple places it could go. One, keep in mind that our enterprises and utilities pay a MUSA and MISA to the municipality. So it could be reducing the revenue to the municipality itself, but that's less than 5%. I mean, it's a relatively small amount. It could go back to the ratepayers in some cases, but I don't know what that looks like in terms of the RCA, for example, with AWU. But I think that would be the idea that, or you could maybe build a capital reserve if you were the port, for example. So I think there are different places it could go, but it wouldn't go into the Anchorage General Fund, that's for sure. In fact, it might come out of the payment to the general fund.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Forrest. Appreciate it.
Are there any other questions for Forrest? All right, seeing none, thank you for that report, Forrest. Moving on to the Anchorage School District. So we have Andy, are you ready?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so this has been, we're trying to wrap up FY21, which would be our period ended June 30th, 2021. It's been a little bit of a kind of a wild year, financially speaking, for everyone, I think. But overall, just kind of want to go over some of the variances that we had and where we ended up, or where we project to end up. We're still not completely closed out, but we're really close, and this should be, really in line with what we end up stating in our financial statements. So in our general fund, our revenue is down about $25.3 million or so from what we had originally budgeted, predominantly due to lower student enrollment, and then the associated local property taxes that went down because we didn't collect we couldn't collect the state money, so the locals depended on that. So we lost money there. We lost money in interest earnings. We lost money in student fees, where we didn't have elementary schools we didn't have any schools open the first semester, and then only secondary didn't open until March. So we just didn't collect these fees for sports and other things that we would typically in a year. Lost money on interest earnings, and then some on impact aid. So about $25.3 million below our budget. About $8.3 million of that was planned usage of fund balance going into the year. So overall, not really what we wanted to see, but we were able to make up quite a bit of that on the expenditure side, where we spent less than we had planned, particularly in salaries and benefits, where we didn't hire a lot of the positions because we were virtual, and we just didn't have the need to hire some of those. So we saved about 1.5%, 2% on salaries and benefits as compared to our budget. Our utilities were down about $3 million from what we had projected, so that was good. And then we had lower costs, particularly within like travel, where no one went anywhere. We didn't spend much money on travel. And then other contracted services, which was predominantly IT software that was either switched over to a different software paid for by CARES Act, or and then the other one big ticket item was kind of the Alaska Middle College payments to the university. We had fewer students going there than what we had anticipated, also due to COVID. So we did save money, about $19 million or $19.3 million on the expenditure side, with all these things added up. So we were able to really kind of make up some of those losses. And we ended up with about a $6 million overall loss in the general fund, and then added another $4 million or so that we had to transfer out to our student nutrition fund to make up for the deficit that they experienced. Their deficit in student nutrition was about $6.1 million total. And we shored that up with a $3.9 million transfer in from the general fund, and then reclassifying those property taxes that we couldn't collect in our general fund due to the state limitations. We were able to reclassify that into our special revenue fund for student nutrition. So overall, our general fund ended about $10 million down from where it was last year. That leaves us with about $54 million in undesignated fund balance, and about $25.5 million of that undesignated fund balance is restricted for bond ratings. So the municipality and the school district can keep our interest rates low whenever we go out and sell bonds for our capital improvements. As far as a percentage of the state fund balance, their measure is the amount of undesignated fund balance, the $54 million divided by the total amount of expenditures that we incur in a fiscal year, is this measure that the state has imposed. It used to be a 10% cap on how much you could carry over. That's been lifted for this year as districts weren't able to spend all their money in a lot of cases. So that's been lifted. We're at about 8.8% of our fund balances compared to our expenditures. So originally, it's much higher than what we were projecting potentially back in December and January. So everything turned out, frankly, about as well as it could have given the circumstances. Our People Transportation Fund ended pretty well. They're about $2.8 million short on our state transportation grant, just due to lower enrollment again. We did get some money, about $1.7 million from a legal settlement with Volkswagen based on the emissions scandal and the subsequent payments they had to make out to as a remedy for that. So we were able to buy new buses with that money. And then we saved money there again on salaries, and also we saved about 3.3 million on our contracted transportation contract with Reliant. As we weren't running buses the first half of the year and only limited in scope the second half, we really, we ended up not having to spend that money because we weren't being charged the amount of all those routes. We did continue making some payments just to keep those folks employed and run limited routes, but as per our contract, but we were able to shave off about 20% of those costs. So overall, they ended pretty well. They ended with a net fund balance of about 3.3 million in our transportation. We anticipate using that in future years to shore up ongoing deficits that we have whenever we create those budgets. But really, from the finance side, everything worked out fairly well for us this year. We did lose some money, but really not as much as we were expecting kind of December, January timeframe. School did start back up, as you saw. We're all in person now. We do have the thing now we're contending with is as we've started school back up, some of those positions we didn't hire, and some of them we've been trying to hire, particularly in special education. We've got about 180 positions that are vacant right now. So while we're not spending that money, there's a lot of services we're not being able to provide or providing at a reduced scope, which isn't ideal. So really, we've got a campaign out there to try to get employees hired for our special education, as well as our bus drivers and food service workers are also have been short-staffed. So we're really trying to get those numbers up and get those hirings done if we can find the available workforce. I know the private sector and really about everywhere has seen this labor shortage, and it's affecting us as well. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions, or if Carl has something he'd like to add, or Carl Jacobs, our school board representative.
So yeah, I can chime in just really briefly. Andy, as always, really appreciate the you in that update. The board did pass the transfer funds to student nutrition at our last meeting. The board budget committee met on the 25th, and we spent majority of our time going over the various tranches of federal money that the district has received and is planning to receive. And so working to get up to speed on that information. Reading between the lines, I think we might be scheduling some additional sessions just because there's a lot of information involved that folks like Andy know the back of their hand, but the board needs to make sure it has a good understanding about. And our next meeting is on September 22nd, and the school board budget meetings happen at noon. The only other update that I think is relatively recent, isn't necessarily directly involved with this committee, but might be of interest, is I believe our ASD's COVID reporting dashboard is getting updated as of Friday to include a breakdown of location-based data as well. And so that's something to look forward to. But beyond that, if there's questions for Andy or for myself or feedback for the board, I'd be glad to receive that too.
We had a comment in the chat from Tasha. I heard about rolling bus routes. Is that saving money? And what's the trade for no service?
I would say it probably is saving some money, and just in the sense that we don't have this, we're not paying the staff to go out and run these routes, or if it's a Reliant bus, not paying that daily route. So there would be savings to have. I mean, that's certainly not our goal. Is we don't really want these savings. We'd much rather prefer the bus routes and a reliable way for the students to get to school. I haven't heard any of course, I may not be the one to actually receive complaints too about students not being able to get to school. Carl may have a little more information on what he's heard as a board member, but typically, if there are families having issues without the bus service, then they don't complain to me, they complain to the school board. So maybe Carl can chime in on that one too.
Yeah, and Tasha, just to address the question, which I appreciate, I have heard from a number of parents regarding concerns as to the how ASD is handling the kind of the rolling bus outages that have occurred due to a labor shortage. Unfortunately, it's not something just ASD is dealing with. As Andy mentioned, both Fairbanks and Matsu have had outages of the same nature. what the board has been told is that it's not necessarily a resource problem in terms of funding. It's truly a labor shortage. And so I am trying to have conversations with relevant stakeholders to identify ways to leverage the resources we do have to try and remedy the problem. But I know that the administration's on it. And so I'm hoping we get it solved as soon as possible. But it is something of interest to the public for sure. And we need to make sure all buses are up and running. Unfortunately, the problem with the labor shortage has been ongoing for multiple years. It's not a new struggle to ASD as I understand it, but definitely has been exacerbated this year due to everything going on.
Great, thanks. And I think I saw Carla had her hand up. Carla, do you still have a question? All right, maybe not. Alyssa, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I was curious, Andy, if you've done like alternative projections for what things look like if ASD were to have to go back to online. Is and maybe this then is a question for Carl, is that even an option or something that the board is considering? I'm just kind of curious what things look like if if things have to go virtual again.
I don't think it would, it kind of depends on the timing. Our revenue is generated based on the enrollment count the first 20 days in October. So in the event we were to go online and if students disenrolled between now and October when we started counting those, then it could have a significant effect on our revenue. As far as expenditures go, most of our either employment contracts or state statutes or at least the state statute for certificated employees is once they're on contract by the end of May of the previous year, they're on contract for the year. So we don't have the option of, if we lose a bunch of kids, to reduce the staff. But as far as I don't really know, I guess, how to address the question was if we would go back to virtual. But we would be able to project out some things given whatever the enrollment is. So a lot of it's going to be a timing issue as far as the actual revenue that we receive. I guess I don't have a whole lot more than that.
No, that's helpful. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So this is Lindsay. It looks like Carla was not able to unmute, and her question was about why we need to report COVID by school.
So Andy, you feel free to fill in the gaps. My understanding is that there was an interest by parents in having a solid understanding as to the amount of transfer occurring on a location basis. And so that was something that was asked for. And I know that this board and the administration is very much in favor of increased transparency while maintaining privacy, and following legal obligations. And we haven't had a board meeting to address where we can hear additional information outside of what's been publicly disclosed to parents through an email that went out yesterday by the superintendent. But I would assume that this is a happy medium in terms of providing information to parents, offering that transparency, as well as maintaining confidentiality of relevant information following the legal obligation the district has. I don't know. Andy, feel free to, if you think there's other angles there, by all means.
No, I think that pretty well sums it up. It was just in a response to kind of the community outreach to provide that information.
This is Carla. I finally figured out how to unmute. Sorry. This has nothing to do with the budget, and so I don't want to spend too much time on it. It's just that when I see something like this, it really worries me that you guys are going to unnecessarily bring your teachers and your administration under a microscope or under a spotlight. Like if you have a school that just happens to be in a geographic area of the city that has more of an outbreak, I fear that you guys have opened yourself up for parents to come in and say, it's the irresponsibility of that particular administration and and those particular teachers that is causing this school to have more outbreaks than another school. Does that make any sense?
Carla, I appreciate the feedback. I will gladly pass that on to the rest of the board, and it's definitely a very valid perspective.
Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions on for Anchorage School District for Andy or Carl? I see Alyssa's typing.
Please disregard. I can't get the chat function to work on my phone. I was just gonna say I thought it was a really good point that Carla brought up. I hadn't thought about that, so I was appreciative that you brought that up.
All right, great. Thanks for that. All right. Moving on to the budget report from OMB.
Okay, so as you can see, I'm here all by myself. Initially on the draft was Travis and Portia. Travis asked that I briefly talk about the CARES funds, and Portia is out of office on vacation, so she gave me talking points that I will discuss. In the item number 1, we are on track to deliver the budget to the Assembly in October as required by code, and look forward to the opportunity to discuss the budget then. That said, the 120-day memo was filed yesterday. We completed it in accordance as previously, and it has preliminary data as best that we could prepare. So I would urge all the members to download it from the website, because it's available on the website and it's available for public inspection. Is there any other questions regarding item number 1? Okay, so I'm going to move on to item number 2, CARES funds. Basically, the remaining amount from the CARES fund is $317,000. The only concern from the budget perspective that might be outstanding purchase orders that haven't been posted yet, so that amount could actually go smaller. So from the budget perspective, we would I would advise the Assembly to give us a little bit of time until the controllers and all the other postings are happening to possibly reallocate any of the remaining funds. On the next slide, please. On the ARPA funds, so Portia Noble is still running that project. Let me see what I have for the notes here. The remainder of ARPA grants are being processed. Currently, there are still 15 grants in managing departments that have not been executed or have any expenditures. 9 grants are being in process. The COVID-19 Business Relief Grant Program has had 90 applicants. The last day to apply is September 30th. On August 31st, accounting, OECD, and the Mayor's Office completed the ARPA first round of reporting to the Department of Treasury. There will be an ARPA work session with the Anchorage Assembly on Friday, August 10th from 2 to 3 p.m. in City Hall room 155. So this slide, what shows you the 23 million that we started, the budgeted, the current budget, and the 15 million that's remaining right now. So that's the best that I can do at this time for the board. If we'll go on the next slide, please, Carla, Lila. this is the same slide that Portia presented during the budget committee meeting with the assembly. If you know of anyone, please follow this advertisement and get in contact with Portia. Is there any other questions about that?
This is Alyssa. You said August 10th. Is that September 10th?
Let me see here. Oh, you know what? Then good catch. Unfortunately, she said it in here, August 10th. So maybe she was incorrect. Maybe she meant September 10th, but I don't know. Since I'm not managing the fund and the entire process, I truly don't know. So maybe that I will have it clarified and send you an email to make sure that we're all on the same page. Is there any other questions? Because I have a couple more points that I would like to make.
Hi, Carl. This is Carolyn. Quick question. I might have missed it. How much money is available for this business relief grant program?
Can you go back to the slide? Right now, can you go up one more? The $15 million. That's what's, yeah, almost $16 million. That's what's left right now. So that screenshot, I don't know if you guys know, this is directly from our budgeting system. So where we track all the budget that comes right from there. So we just took a screenshot. Is there any, I think there's a question for Forrest. Do we know what $156 million was spent on? Forrest, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. Say that again.
I think there's a question in the chart, in the chat that's asked by Carla. Is do we know what $156 million was spent on?
Yeah, I mean, there is an accounting of that. I'm trying to think where it is, or where it can most easily be found. But that's over the course of, a year and a half with many different, what do you call it, resolutions. We know what the largest budget items are. They are the rental relief program, the small business grant program, and the first responders program. I'm trying to think. Actually, Carolyn, do you happen to know if the admin had put out a document as they were on the way out on that?
Thanks, Forrest. I know that it was something that they were working on. I left the office in March of this year.
Right.
I'm not quite sure that something actually got put out, but I'm looking on the COVID-19 website now to see if that information is available. I'll put whatever I find in the chat.
Yeah, and the assembly website also had a sort of description of where the money was all allocated to. But some things were sort of double counted, if that makes sense, because they fit into multiple kind of categories. So I'm not sure if that added up to exactly 156 million. Yeah.
It's Carolyn again. I found a link that I'll put in the chat, and this is from the COVID-19 website, and it directs to an ArcGIS website having to do with the Assembly's allocations, and it goes to housing and homelessness, community investments, family support, economic stimulus, public health and safety, and a number of other pillars that the Assembly allocated the information to, or the money to. So I'll put that in the chat now.
I do have one point to make. I think the budget will be released on October 1, as dictated by the code. And so our next session is on October 7th for resolutions and suggestions. So I think there will be 2 opportunities for this board to make their recommendations as the budget is rolled out. Obviously, the October 7th, there'll be only a few days to really have a detailed analysis of the budget, but there'll be still some little bit of extra time other than November 4th. That time might be October 7th. On my end, unless there's no other questions, I am done.
Anna, did you have a question?
Yeah, not a question, just a comment, but just to note that we had talked about scheduling at least one work session as this group in maybe mid-October. So we can come back to that, but I think that's another opportunity to look at the budget if the timing doesn't work for the October 7th meeting.
I actually have a question for Carl. So we received a PDF of the 128 report, but I'm looking on the website now. I just started. You said it was posted for the public. Where could I find that?
It's on the OMB website, at the very bottom of our website.
Okay.
Maybe, you know what, maybe I'll have Lila just show a screen where exactly it is, so you can have the
There it is, Office of Management.
just give us a second, we'll point you to the right direction.
Oh, I found it.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
So it contains all the attachments as in any other previous years.
I'll put it in the chat. Oh, Carolyn just put it in the chat too. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, great. And then moving on to audience participation, I didn't see anyone outside of the commission log on it. So I don't know if anyone else wants to make a comment at this time. Okay, moving on to open discussion. Is there anything anyone wants to bring up? Okay, so have we scheduled that? Oh, sorry, Anna. Did you want to chime in?
Oh, I think I was going to ask what you were starting to say, if it was a work session.
So I think that we had kind of looked at some dates. Should we go ahead and calendar that now, Lila?
Yes, if we want to suggest a couple dates, I can do a doodle poll unless you guys want to decide on a specific date. We can go from there.
How about the let's see, I would say the 21st, but I may be out that day. Could do the 28th, which would be the week before our regularly scheduled meeting.
Unfortunately, I can't do it on the 28th, and the 21st is the assembly meeting.
Do Thursdays usually work well for folks? If we're going to do a doodle poll to try and find, or are there other days that work as well? If we were to do it, say, on maybe a Tuesday or a Wednesday?
Going to be a weekend?
I'm sorry?
Going to be a weekend at all?
A weekend? Sorry, I can't quite hear you, James.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can it be a weekend? Can that be an option too?
Well, I would not want to take Lila, use her personal time for the meeting. So if we could try and keep it through during the week, I think that would be best in terms of making sure everyone who can attend. Well, we'll just throw out something, possibly. How about the week of I don't know, October 11th, and see if there's a time in there that works for people.
I can do a doodle poll for all the days of October 11th, and we can see which one's more favorable.
Okay, that's great. All right, well, if there is nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
I can second that. This is Jimmy.
Thanks, Jimmy. All right, we are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
All right, bye, everyone.
Bye.